I was in Yemen, and I was probably like 21, 22 years old. And an old relative of mine just came to Yemen after being gone for so many years. And he wasn't doing so well. And not because of his age. I mean, he was around his 50s, but he could barely walk. He had to walk with a cane. And other very close relative of mine, who I'm being very vague about for privacy reasons, suggested that we go to this place that's 2 hours away from my home that I've never been before. Because there's a man there that can help this relative of mine walk without using a cane. So this relative and others and a close friend of mine drove for 2 hours until we reached this marketplace that's absolutely filthy. I mean, the entire region was just horrible. The stench was unbearable. We then walked into this alley, and it was dark, though the sun was out. A feeling of dread just washed my body. We walk into this dark store, and you can hear the whispers and smell the stench of misery and hopelessness. The first thing I noticed while walking into this store that looked like it belonged to Medusa is that the wall had many shelves, and on those shelves were like many little bottles and vines, like potion, which I assumed at the time were just medicine, homemade medicine, because it wasn't uncommon to see such displays in areas in Yemen, especially places that belong to holy men that people will go to be read on. See, there's these places in Yemen that people would go to who feeling sick and that medicine is not really working for them. And they would go to these pious men who own these places, and they would read the Quran on these people and share with them natural remedies that they make at home, like milk and honey, etc. Anyway, I thought this place that we went to was one of those places. As we walked in further into the store, I noticed it's filled with people, men, women, mainly old women, whom looked very unfortunate and sickly. There were even some children there. And in the middle of this room, this very ominous and dark, scary room, that's filled with sick people and, frankly, very poor, filthy people, there's a man whom was wearing a traditional Yemeni thobe that was white, absolutely bright, like he was the lamp in the middle of the room. And he had a traditional Yemeni dagger attached to his waist, and in front of him was an old lady that he held her head while reading some things that I thought were familiar, but I couldn't really make out most of the things that he was saying. He was talking so fast. Then his assistant came up to us and told us to have a seat, who I assumed was his wife, but there was barely any room for all of us to sit. But then she informed us there's another waiting room that has a little space for us to sit. And at this time I was fed up. I mean, the smell. The city was horrible already, but the smell, imagine this dense place filled with people who, sorry to say, were just filthy and they were sick. It was like my nostrils was on fire. It was now just me, my friend, and this relative that came from the US. We then enter the other room, and it was packed, filled with the same type of people from the first room, and barely any place to sit. Fortunately for my relative, he found a place to sit. Considering his condition, he needed to sit. My friend and I went back to the original room so we can see what this whole thing was all about. So my friend and I stood there, and we just observed this man while he was doing some type of gestures with his hands and reciting these things that we found familiar but not entirely familiar. And he was just speaking, like I said, very, very quickly. And this old woman who sat in front of him while he was reciting these things onto her had her hands, both of her hands, balled into a fist and put on her lap. But then I noticed her hands were wet, and she was gripping on something in both of her hands. Then the man spat on her a few times, which, by the way, really isn't unusual. I have seen it before by holy men reading on sickly people. But what was strange is that he then told her to open her hands. And in her hands were folded up wet cotton. Yes, folded up wet balls of cotton. You heard me right. And they were folded. And he took one of these cotton balls out of her hand and opened them. He opened this cotton ball and revealed inside of this cotton ball a little note, like a folded note. And this folded note was filthy. I mean, it looked like it was filled like with little tiny pieces of shit. And this never happened to me before. I never witnessed this. This is the first time. And honest to God, I was intrigued. I was so curious what's happening right now in front of my eyes. He then opens the letter up, shows it to her briefly, and tosses it away. He then opens the other cotton ball from the other hand. And again, there's another letter that's also filthy and that looks like it was wiped. This old woman then dries her hand, pays the man, and walks out. The assistant then comes to us, asking for who will be next, even though we just showed up. And the obvious answer that I know, and you should too, is because we look rich as fuck compared to everybody in there. We then have our relative who we were there for, who's sitting in the other room, come in. And he sits down in front of this man. And this man, again, says some weird stuff that we can't understand and some things that we do understand. And then reached to the side of him. In the side, and I notice in the side of him, there's a big, huge pile of cotton. And he takes this piece of cotton, balls it up, dips it in water, and puts it in my relative's hand. And takes another piece and wets it and puts it in the other hand and tells my relative to put it on his lap. And then he proceeds to recite on my relative. And not only that, he then takes a dagger that's tied to his waist and puts it on my relative's face in a weird position, like several times in different type of positions, while he's reciting this thing that I can't really understand. And he's, again, reciting very fast. So, you know, it's amazing that I understood some of the things that he said. But very strange, just very strange. The entire thing was so strange. So after a few minutes of reciting these strange things and doing these strange rituals, and then spitting on my relative several times, which, again, is really not unusual, he then tells my relative to open his hands. He then takes the cotton and once again unfolds the cotton, and there's a letter that's filthy with little residue of shit, I'm assuming. And once again, the other hand, he opens it, gives him the cotton, he unfolds the cotton, and again, another letter with filthy. But this time, it had some red coloring on it. And inside the cotton, there was red little drops of red ink. And then my relative dries his hand, pays the man, and then uses his cane to walk towards us, towards me and my friend, and tells us that he doesn't feel anything different. Another relative of ours who was there with us decided to also have this man do this ritual on them, and I witnessed the same thing. The only difference is that one hand with the cotton had a letter that's filthy with doodle, somebody's doodle, some stranger's doodle on it, and the other hand was just red ink. And then she stands up and she walks towards us and starts blaming her husband for what happened. Like, I was so confused. She started blaming her husband, saying this is her husband's doing. I had no freaking idea what she was talking about. But then my friend, I guess, piqued his interest and decided to try it, sat down, and the same exact thing happened to him. I mean, one hand was a letter that's filled with doodle, the other hand was filled with red ink. And then it piqued my interest. I wanted to try it now. I was so intrigued. How is he doing this? But then when I wanted to try it, everyone wants to leave now. It's getting too late. It's getting too dark. We have to go. Which, fine. Okay, it's totally fine. In fact, I'm actually thankful that I didn't try it. And I'll let you know later on. So, quick context. Backstory to my relative who uses a cane to walk. He was known to be very healthy, very strong, and was able to walk with both legs and etc. You know, he was a very healthy guy until he got married. And my other relatives believe that this woman he got married to is the reason why he's not able to walk like he used to, and that he's fragile now, and that he's getting sick because of her. And they believe that she used some type of spell or some type of curse on this man. So back to the story. We then drive home for 2 hours. We get home, it's around 7 o'clock, maybe 8 o'clock at night. Me, my friend, and my relative who uses a cane were sitting down, we were talking. I honestly cannot remember what we were talking about, but I'm assuming that we were talking about what just happened. And suddenly, my relative feels different. He says he feels different. And my friend is acting differently. He doesn't say he feels different, but he's acting differently than what I'm used to. My relative then stands up, like suddenly, stands up quickly with no cane and starts dancing, saying that he feels better, saying that he feels different, that he feels stronger. My friend then starts praising God, and so do I. But I'm so shocked, I'm so confused actually. I have no idea what to think. What just happened is what's going through my head. How is this possible? And the only thing that I can think of is that this must be a placebo effect. Any second now, his legs will turn to ashes. My friend then starts hyping him up. I mean, he's hyping my relative up. He's telling him, oh, listen, you don't even need to go back to the US. We're going to find you a new wife. You can stay here now. You don't have to go back to that witch. Now we know that the reason why you felt sick and the reason why you were so fragile is because she bewitched you. We know this for certain now. All the while, my relative is dancing. He's jumping up and down. He's excited. And he's agreeing with my friend. He's saying that you're absolutely right. Matter of fact, I'm going to call my wife now and divorce her. He then takes the phone, sits down, and calls his wife in the US. And right away says you're divorced. And we're Muslims. Like, if you say to your wife you're divorced, that is it. I mean, you don't need to sign papers. She is considered to be divorced. You both are considered to be divorced. You're no longer together. All right, you could be in this in a room by yourself with nobody around. And if you tell your wife that it's done, that is it. It's done. I mean, God has witnessed that you have said this, and it is done. That's all that's needed. And my friend, the way he was acting is that he's usually humble, very quiet, and he wasn't quiet anymore. He wasn't humble anymore. He was actually kind of douchey, like a douchebag. He was being a dirtbag. He was being a piece of shit, in my opinion. Like, he was being an asshole, and he was saying things that I'd rather not say, because these are real people, and this is a true story, and I do not want to repeat what was said. All right. But all I have to say is that he wasn't acting the same. And then a few days later, my relatives leaves to New York to divorce his wife and to make it official. But then suddenly changes his mind. And not only did he change his mind, in a span of 2 weeks, he became even more sick and entirely incapable of walking again, that he has to be pushed around and on a wheelchair, and then dies. His wife then inherits everything. I mean, my relative was a very wealthy guy. You know, he was doing all right. Meanwhile, every family member he has, including myself, blames his wife, and I suspect his wife. I mean, I am not entirely sure, but I feel like it's kind of suspect that the man was jumping around, dancing around, doing his thing, and the moment he gets back to her, he's now even more sick and just dies in less than a month. Now, this might be obvious to you guys, but it wasn't obvious to me until like later on in my life, that the person that we went to see to help our relative in that dark, ominous, filthy, stinky place was a magician. And the whispers and the recitation that he was saying was spells to break curses. People literally go there because they believe they were cursed, and this man claims that he can help them, and he does these rituals to get rid of the curse. Which is why I thank God that I never sat down that day and allowed this man to whisper his satanic voodoo bullshit on me and, spit on me with his filthy satanic worshiping mouth. But if I had known what that man was and what that place was, I would have stopped my family from going over there, and my friend and myself. And I honestly believe, even though I do believe, my relative's wife is somewhat, maybe, possibly, very likely, actually, I think, behind his death, But I also think that this witch guy just made shit worse. By the way, if you're wondering what happened to my friend, basically our relationship kind of faded away, and so did his relationship with his family. Like, it just turned bad. Things went bad, which is why I say that this devil that we went to just made things worse. It's never the freaking answer. They only make shit worse. But yeah, this is a true story, so hopefully you guys enjoyed this. Please like and subscribe.